This podcast is supported by Progressive, a leader in RV insurance. RVs are for sharing adventures with family, friends, and even your pets. So if you bring your cats and dogs along for the ride, you'll want Progressive RV insurance. They protect your cats and dogs like family by offering up to $1,000 in optional coverage for vet bills in case of an RV accident, making it a great companion for the responsible pet owner who loves to travel. See Progressive's other benefits and more when you quote RV insurance at progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Pet injuries and additional coverage and subject to policy terms.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Hello everyone, hope you're well and had a good blank game week 29. But today we're not going to talk about that. Instead, as trailed at the end of last week's show, this week we're going to take it a little bit off piste and spend some time devoted to one particular subject in FPL. After a bit of a period churning out perhaps more, functional FPL content, it's safe to say we're looking forward to this one. And to assist us in the conversation today, he said it, we're delighted to be welcoming back friend of the pod, aka an analytic FPL Simon Seister. Great Sai man, the Dark Lord of Analytics for today's chat, which shockingly is a deep dive into the interplay between analytics and FPL, following on from our brilliant preseason discussion. See how things panned out as the season has rolled on. New chips have been unveiled, and of course, I don't think at the time we even knew that you could roll to 5 transfers. So quite a lot has changed since last time we spoke. Great to have you back, Sai. How you doing, mate? And great to catch up at Meets in person as well a couple of weeks ago.
00101. For reference, that's what Tom put on the script for me, so I thought I would indulge him. It was really lovely to see you at Meets. It was really nice, and I'm doing well. And a lot has happened at FPL. You're right. We got new rules, we got new chips, and we've had 29 game weeks, so we've got a lot to discuss, I guess.
That's correct.
How are you, Pricey?
I'm good. Thank you very much. Usually Tom would be the one introing me, but you get to do the honors today. So thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have you back on the show, mate. The one that we did earlier on this season was one of my favorites that I think I've done at Who Got the Assist. So yeah, really, really good to get you back on. A really good time for the season to do it as well. So hopefully no one minds us as we take a little bit of a step back this week, away from the week-to-week drudgery of the game week scores and bold claims and all of that stuff that Tom and I inevitably get wrong every single week. This week, we can't get anything wrong because we're leaning on another expert. Today, we're going to be devoting the entire thing to analytics, the whole conversation around it, both pro and against, and skip out on all of the more functional FPL stuff. We'll come back with that in a couple of weeks' time. We've got a nice little break at the moment with the international break, and then of course the FA Cup after the international break. So we've used this time as a little bit of a way to take ourselves away from that week-to-week stuff and enjoy a bit of a deep dive. So it is Tuesday, the 18th of March. Blank Game Week 29 is in the books and the international break is well underway. The FA Cup weekend is to come as well. Not going to do any of the previews or anything like that today. Let's dive straight into it. And Tom, you've got a list of questions I've noticed in the script. Is there anything in particular you want to start off asking Simon from the top?
Well, I guess it's analytics anonymous or analytics unanimous. So I don't know which one we're going to go with today. I'm pretty sure it's unanimous because, my name is Tom and I have dabbled in analytics, and I'm fairly sure, I don't want to speak for you, Sam, but I'm pretty sure you've been beamed up as well by the analytics overlords, as you've put it. So yeah, I think as you said, we'll definitely kind of just, I suppose, go a bit off piece. There's lots of kind of things to potentially discuss. I don't think we're going to go through every single one of the points that I've put on. It's just more sort of just for our reference, really. And most of the time, these things sort of unpack themselves and actually lead on from one to the other. As we found out in preseason, we didn't really have much of a discussion guide, did we? We just kind of got into it, and hey, presto, hour and a half later, we're like, oh, we probably should wrap this up now. So let's see how we go. I suppose first off, Simon, we've got to ask you, how are you doing this season? How much in the dust have you left us behind, etc.?
Yeah, it's gone quite well. I'm sitting at 22k right now, so I can't really complain. I had a pretty like rough start to the season. I started with no Haaland, just Salah. We can get into that if we want to get into like all the stuff around like free transfers, which I'm sure we will. And then I played my free hit in 9, which has also then basically changed how I've played the whole season since then. And then like rose loads into up to like 15k game week 18 just before wildcard. I have like a weird superstition about wildcards as to whether a team is lucky or unlucky. And like when you wildcard, you're kind of like flipping the coin again.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it worked out this time that superstition was correct, even though I know it's obviously nonsense and it's just randomness. It's still just like,
are you telling me my wildcard failure wasn't complete luck, Simon? That's absolute sacrilege. I can't believe it.
just a little bit.
Okay.
And then 22k. It's going pretty well. And then because I played my free hit, I played my wild card last week, my second wild card, and at that I thought I was kind of staring down the barrel of like being absolutely slaughtered in 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, and then like just having an underpowered wild card at the end. But then I think I kind of found a way out, which is nice.
Yeah, there's always so many routes and so many things. And I think one of the big sort of things that I've noticed, I'm not come on to content creators and that horrible term, but we'll come on to that maybe in a little bit. But something I have noticed is that like finding a path, finding a route is in the vernacular now a lot more in terms of how people are kind of talking about their potential FPL moves. And I think that kind of that maybe has reflected a bit of an embrace of FPL Analytics more and more this year. I mean, do you think, Simon, to start with you, like, attitudes have changed this season as it's rolled on versus what we saw last year and what we kind of spoke about a little bit in the preseason pod, like more uptake and things like that? Because it certainly does seem that looking around the teams and looking around decisions being made just on timeline, not even from hearing other people's content, but people are making decisions which are a lot more sort of informed, influenced by the analytics sort of lead.
Yeah, I think it's been a gradual effect over a few years, and I guess maybe you're kind of noticing it a bit more with the new rules as well. I think as people have kind of caught on to like how they work as the season's gone on and kind of like learned it, then I think people have realized the value of rolling a lot more, which is something that kind of like Solver's told you pretty quickly early on, and have done in like other games like Fan Team where that rule's been in place. So I guess in some ways, like people have kind of caught on to the thing which like Solver's told you earlier in the season. And in terms of the picks, I think there's kind of an indirect effect as well. I think a lot of the content creators use not review to like do their picks, but to somewhat influence their picks, or something with similar methods. It doesn't have to be review, could be odds, could be some other model, whether it's like Hub's model or whatever. They were going to come out with like roughly similar numbers. And then when they're recommending picks, their picks are going to be influenced by that probably more than they would have been 5 years ago. And so that's going to trickle down as well.
I mean, Sam, you definitely kind of listen and watch a bit more than I do these days. I mean, do you think that's the same for you and what you're seeing and hearing?
Yeah, I do. And I remember when I first started taking FPL quite seriously 5, 6, 7 years ago now, which ages me terribly. It was a lot more common, I think, to have gut instinct be a reasonable factor in your decision making. And a lot of people would say, I just have a feeling on a player. And especially with the rise of FPL content, it's everywhere, whether it's written or video or wherever you look, you can't really move for it now. Almost every single content creator out there, I think, I can't really even name one that doesn't, will, even if they've got a gut instinct now, they'll need to lean on some sort of data point, some sort of reference to prove that their decision making isn't flawed, that they have got some logic behind it. Now, obviously, review has risen up, and that's that's taking a big chunk of those decisions, and it's also what a lot of people do use to sense check, I think. And both you and I, Tom, at times, I don't know how often you do use it, but I often have a look at it and just see, oh, okay, is there a player I haven't considered that review is pushing, and how can I work that into my plans, and is it something that I am okay with. And outside of review, you see someone like Rob TFPL on Twitter and on Blue Sky now does incredible work and graphics around the predictions for each individual game week. So rather than a long run thing, it's more on bookies odds and manipulating that into data that as FPL managers makes sense to us. And then that's, again, just a small leap then towards something like player scoring odds or clean sheet odds. And all of that is now much more prevalent and commonplace in everyone's decision making, led by content creators. And I think now if you go on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it, or Blue Sky, the day before a game week deadline, almost everyone who tells you about what moves they're going to make will have some sort of data point, whether it's what you would consider to be the correct data point, or whether it's like just picking something that really like just helps show that your data, that your reasoning might be sound. Everyone's got something that they lean on now. Very rarely will I see someone just like, oh, I just felt like it. Like I just thought Marmoush would outscore Haaland this week. I had a feeling. Like that doesn't happen anymore. And I think that's the difference in the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. It's swung towards people will still use gut instinct and go off of their emotions, but they will maybe also lean on the data behind it to say, that's why I like this gut feeling. It's that I can prove it scientifically somehow.
Yeah, you can quantify exactly why you're
yeah.
kind of leaning towards a certain asset. And Robbie in the chat just said, I just pick on gut instinct every week, but ran quite nicely. So I don't think I need these models, TBH. And I think that there's definitely a place for that in FPL, because, you know, the abiding mantra is always play it your way. And we kind of spoke about this in the summer, that actually the reality is that we're all just trying to maximize and optimize our experience of playing FPL. And you know, analytics, Simon, just plays a role as a tool in that. But of course, over time, the reason I call you the Dark Lord of FPL Analytics was just because on Twitter back before it was the bad place, you were able to blow it up with one opinion, one kind of stream of consciousness that kind of ran contra against the grain to what people were thinking, and you know, cut through a lot of these sort of gut instincts. So I suppose for kind of speaking to that point about people kind of talking about gut instincts all the time, like what does analytics, I guess, do for you that kind of sets it apart from kind of that old school way, potentially old school, but and where people do it now, but that way of doing things, which is more, as Sam was kind of giving voice to, just, oh yeah, I kind of have a feeling about this player. What does analytics do for you?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think I came at FPL having come from football analytics, so I guess I've never really known FPL any other way in terms of how I play it. So it wasn't like I played some other way and then I found analytics and then it was like, oh great, I can do this way instead. I think it's part of just how my brain works. If I want to work out how something works, I'm going to try to work out how to predict it. So I'm probably going to build a model of some kind in order to do that. So when I first started, before reviews was around, I had my own player model. I retired it because reviews is better. And so I just wasn't interested in putting in the work to have a model I wasn't going to use. That didn't really seem like a very useful exercise. And yeah, it's just like, if you're going to predict something, like why wouldn't you look at it analytically? You're probably going to have a better chance of getting a better predictor if you follow those methods.
And on that note, I think like review and analytics gets a bit of a dirty name, but I'd like to debug it towards the start of this show, because I think we hit on it late on the last show. And basically there's analog data, there's more simple or more complex data, but all review and all analytics is really doing is taking data that we know to exist, whether it's past goals might be a little bit too simple, but it's data that exists in the world, whether that's something that you've noticed with your eye or not is part of it as well. If player X has got much better XG per 90 data, they're probably going to work out a lot better in FPL review naturally, especially if the minutes are good. And minutes, again, is something that review predicts, but you can also manually change it. So it's not really doing anything that humans aren't already capable of, or maybe non-consciously are trying to manipulate in their own minds anyway. What it is it's taking it out of your own brain and putting it on a screen and giving you all of that information in one very neat little package very quickly, and giving you what is a correct, and I use inverted commas very sparingly here, answer on who would be predicted to get the most points in the next whatever game weeks that you want to run it on. So yeah, some people will say, oh, I'd never use analytics, I'd never use review. Well, review maybe not, but even if you look at past goals and the amount of goals that Salah scored this season, you are technically getting involved in analytics in a very light way.
Yeah, I think that's probably about right. And even if you are looking at underlying data, you are, as you say, like looking at, I guess, particles of the composite that review basically scoops up and puts in front of you and summarizes for you. And I suppose that actually nicely leads into you've got to be living on the rock to have not have seen the rise of AI basically over the last, like, it's completely exploded like over the last kind of few months. I stopped working for a while kind of last May when I was made redundant, and I got back to work, and suddenly analytics, AI analytics, well, not analytics, that's always been known FPL, but AI is absolutely bloody everywhere. And literally everything you described in there, Sam, just all that said to me was basically AI. Right.
Yeah.
And it kind of feels like, I mean, we've had a few tentative models, as in generative AI models in FPL, mostly chatbots, sold in as AI a lot of the time. But as the capability of AI is vastly transformed, it continues to do so basically on a daily basis, monthly basis, you see some ridiculous thing that AI has done. I mean, I'm fascinated to kind of even begin to think about, and this is the pod to do it, I suppose, and wonder kind of how we see analytics and FPL generally being impacted by AI. Because if people are saying, Simon, that FPL review is basically cheating and taking out your own thought from playing FPL, imagine what people are going to think when the generative AI crunches the same numbers, is able to present options based on your individual play style and other contexts that it kind of has picked up from you. I mean, do you think that's kind of the next step almost for analytics in FPL to be powered a bit more by AI?
I'm gonna come back to something Sam said before I come and answer your question on AI, if that's all right. It was about the gut instinct thing, and I think it's very hard to have a gut instinct on 500 players.
Yeah.
And therefore, what analytics does is it's going to give you like a decent baseline for basically everything you don't know about. And then if you have very strong feelings about stuff, you can edit the EV. It's an update that Review recently made where you can basically download the data, make some changes, and then upload it again. And then you can use your changes to the solver. So if you have like particular gut instincts and stuff, you can make some changes to reflect that and then solve it with your beliefs. So I definitely recommend doing that if you're like interested in using analytics and also bringing like your gut feeling and kind of like football knowledge to the table as well. It could be a nice way to dovetail them. Just thought I'd throw that out there for everyone before I get onto the AI stuff. On the AI stuff, yeah, I haven't seen anything great so far. Like you say, it's like mostly chatbots, and like it's very hard for them to have like up-to-date data. In a way that I've seen work. Like maybe I think we have like pretty good analytical tools to like solve the game, because you're dealing with a problem which is like quite contained, right? It's like a game with like particular rules, and like you can kind of predict the points, and like you don't need a lot of like wild stuff. You can maybe get it to like think about strategy and stuff, but like I don't know. I'm not sure an AI is really going to be like incredible. I think probably like most useful applications would just be like quality of life stuff, like getting really nice summaries of like injury news and like rumors and stuff like that, and like how credible they are, and like all your kind of stuff, so you can like make your X-minutes judgments like pretty easily, just without having to spend a lot of time searching stuff. Like that would be nice. I'm not sure an AI is gonna like beat like very engaged humans at FPL anytime soon. I have to say.
Yeah.
One of my Oh, sorry, Tom. One of my former companies I worked for was like obviously very, very into AI, especially recently. And I started like just toying around with some of the like, you know, you've got your ChatGPT, you've got Claude, you've got Perplexity, all of these AI different functions that you can use now. And none of them were able to do anything with FPL because frankly, they've got the player names and they've got like open source data, but they don't have things like FPL review or like the FPL database to plug into. Even something like a stats bomb would be really helpful to an AI bot to kind of bring it up to a level that would probably not get it past what FPL review does already, because all AI is really doing in that circumstance is scanning information that already exists. And FPL review is just taking a very specific set of data that already exists. In fact, the data that you need to make the decision. So I understand the worry about AI. And I think maybe from that point of view, there's more of a danger of AI teams being created that managers just farm different potential routes through hundreds of different teams. Hopefully FPL keeps stamping down on that and make it almost impossible to do so. But I'd be more worried about that than an actual AI tool being used to assist me or anyone else in making more informed decisions than what the data and the different applications that are already out there are capable of doing. Because there's not like this a magic pool of data that exists that review or someone else can't get hold of that a chatbot or AI tool can.
Yeah, and I spend a lot of the time. A lot of it is, as you said, access to those APIs is quite difficult to do. And I suppose it's more of a longer term horizon thing, whether they'd ever get the rights to be able to do that. And I don't know. I suppose we had examples. So I think the BBC a few years back did kind of an AI team playing FPL, which ended up in kind of the top 50k or something like that. I know that, and I'm not besmirching them at all here, but Fix and Hub both have their quote unquote AI teams. Which kind of to some extent does what the sort of thing that you were saying, Sam. But yeah, I wonder whether we might see, a chat GPT created team do okay at some point, and then you'd have some sort of terrible front person kind of acting as if they know what they're talking about, that all their managers can go, you're a total fraud, because I know that's absolute rubbish what you're saying, but you're just using ChatGPT or something. But yeah, I was going to say the hallucinations that still exist within AI are probably going to be something which is quite difficult and quite challenging. So that was again tangential point, but when I was a few friends and I play fantasy Bundesliga, and we asked it a few of the questions, like the sort of things that you mentioned, Si, about kind of the background injuries and like lineup predictions. You asked it to look at a kicker and all these German websites, and it returned loads of player names that were no longer at the club to say, oh, he's likely to play this week. And you're like, no, I don't think he is somehow. So yeah, there's still a bit of a way to go, but it's still pretty frightening. Return to the inputs then. I've got a question for you, Si, because I remember many years back when you first came on the pods, you and the line of code formerly known as We Rogue, I assume he's now Python scripts or something like that. I don't really know. I still refuse to believe that what we saw wasn't just an early form of AI generated individual. Like you said back then, it's stats bomb or nothing for data. Nowadays, obviously, FBref, they try to spin it as a good thing that they suddenly were on board with Opta, but we all knew what actually happened there, that they basically got priced out of the market. I've just got a question for you, really. So we obviously on the pod look at FBref just for kind of colour. So just to give some understanding, some reference points for why this player could be quite good. Sam mentioned earlier, this is kind of our evidence base. Do you now even look at that sort of thing, or is it just purely FPL review that gives you kind of the underlying kind of stuff that you need in terms of the EV, if you wouldn't mind explaining what that is for people as well, and other things like that?
Sure, yeah. Before we go down the EV rabbit hole, I'll take the easy one, because the EV rabbit hole could be big.
We'll be stuck here.
Yeah, sorry, I put you under the bus there a little
bit. So, in terms of the looking at other sources, I think we spoke a little bit about this at the start of the season, when probably things are more uncertain. Because I think if you look at review as a model, it's like an odds plus model, right? You can see, typically I don't have any access to the underlyings of the model, but you can see when markets move, like review moves. And I think it originally started as an odds model before he did the machine learning, like kind of basically to just do extra thing on top to make it a better predictor. So like you already have a really, really good predictor in markets, which is why the AI stuff just like it struggles to work, because whenever you get an advance in prediction, you see it as a composite already in the markets, which you can then just read off. But yeah, I use it more at the start of the season when things are more uncertain, because the markets are more uncertain then as well, because they have less data to go on. Now, probably not so much. More for interest than anything else, than like FPL prediction.
Yeah, it's drunk at the start of the year. That's what I always say. And as you found out with your kind of slow start, but I always say, there's a certain point of the season, maybe around your sort of the successful Game Week 9 wildcard, where it really starts to kick in, and suddenly you kind of, it's like the start of a Mario Kart race or something, where someone comes from like 6th place all the way to 1st incredibly quickly. You're like, well, how's that happened? Why have I been less than dust here? It's just because of some superiority, but. I mean, let's go down the EV rabbit hole then. Definitions for people first, because it's something that you see thrown around, and so, everyone nods and goes, "Yeah, it's great EV, yeah," and they're all kind of scratching their heads, going, "Oh, yeah, I definitely know what that means."
Yeah, exactly. So, like true EV, like we can never access. Like it's kind of like. It's the underlying like probability matrix of the universe, essentially, if you kind of believe that it has a probability. And like we can't actually access that. So all we have is kind of like access to estimates of EV. And so like we build that from like market data, XG, opponent strength, blah, 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 blah. And that's what you see in review. And that's why like it's completely fine to bring your own gut feelings if you think that like it actually has a different probability to what the model says. And like we should just like bear in mind that difference when we're like thinking about EV. Like we can get kind of like very caught up on like this model is the truth, which isn't quite right. Like everything is an estimate, and like if you have a reason to go against it, like then like do that, and like you're not like breaking rules or whatever. Which is kind of like sometimes how people can see analytics, I think, more from the outside. But yeah, that for me would be the EV rabbit hole.
Yeah, just trying to find the ways. I mean, Sam, how do you try to navigate that particular rabbit hole? Because it is something which is kind of all encompassing. Like if you look at if anyone has, and if you haven't got any kind of familiarity with FPL review, I'll just mention that you do get obviously a list of players, which are obviously rated by all of the inputs from FPL review in terms of their kind of their projection over the next X weeks, and you can toggle that by X mins. You can also toggle that by EV, and that gives you kind of an idea of kind of the best player to pick depending on the situation you're in, and all sorts of different bits and pieces. But I mean, Sam, from I wouldn't say you're a non-analytics person, that's for sure. But from your understanding, what is it and how do you navigate it?
It's a number I can manipulate however I like it to give me the player I want to buy in. That's how no, I'm kidding. So yeah, I mean, honestly, even Simon's explanation is helpful on this, because whilst I have a fairly trivial base understanding of EV and how it might impact different players at different times, I just go on to review when I feel like I've got a bit of a blank canvas. I don't really know which way I'm going, or just to see it, like sense check, like I mentioned earlier, like, am I going down the right route here? Are there players who represent much higher EV than maybe I had in the back of my mind? Like Simon said, we don't have gut feelings on all 500 players. So there will be inevitably a team that I'm underestimating, or a player that I haven't noticed the minutes climbing recently, or the XG data looking good. Market odds are maybe not reflective of what I internally think. So having a look there is really helpful. But I do play around with different, I guess, different edges that I think I can gain myself on things like review, or just in terms of gut, like Simon mentioned earlier, just because I think maybe X players' minutes are a little bit higher. So Marmoush is a good recent example where he was getting a few earlier subs, but maybe as he's bedded in, we expect that to rise. So if that is correct and he can get closer to 80, 85 minutes a match, then his EV is going to probably need a bit of manual adjustment, or the X-Mins need manual adjustment. And that gives me a completely different version of FPL review or analytics to what anyone else would have. So it's different for my team or your team or anyone else's team. And that, I suppose, hopefully gives me the edge, but more likely probably sets me back because I've made a prediction that is incorrect, or maybe just unlucky. And I'll call myself unlucky, but probably more likely incorrect.
I suppose what it is to me is that you basically taken your thoughts on how good a player is, etc., and instead of just kind of just saying that in the ether, writing it down or whatever, you're putting it into something which calculates that and tells you and gives you kind of a tangible, quantifiable number based on what your thoughts are around a certain player. I mean, that's all it really is to me. And you see things, if you're particularly kind of across socials, or particularly hearing or listening or consuming content. Oh God, I hate that phrase. And you're basically obviously people saying, "Oh, grab the EV" and all this sort of thing. All that means is basically just make a transfer which maximizes the potential output of that transfer. That's basically all that means. Just put into kind of fancy sort of language that variance. I mean, all of these things, Simon, have kind of bled into FPL sort of the lingua franca, or how to put that into simple terms, into the general sort of kind of the general vocabulary of FPL managers these days. And I think that's probably a bit of a feather in the cap of the analytics community, isn't it? That people are kind of saying these terms more and more, and kind of there's general sort of comprehension of what that means. It's a great shorthand, isn't it, for that? It kind of, I suppose in some ways you've exploded form as just kind of the main sort of moniker, the main sort of way in which people can talk about a player. We'd still say he's in form every now and again, just because it's a shorthand for has scored lots of goals or lots of points in the last few weeks. But these things have kind of become a bit more of a more scientific way of kind of saying this player is probably a good pick, haven't they?
Yeah, I think people have realized it works. Ultimately, I think people have seen that people who've like used these methods have got consistently good like overall ranks, and so they've kind of got curious and gone like, "Hey, like what's happening over here? How come you keep getting good ranks?" And kind of got interested. So yeah, fair enough. Seems good. All in my ear.
Makes it harder for all of us, though. It's more competitive at the top.
Yeah. But like, it's good though. Like, it's good to have more people interested, because then you get like more discussion, and like you see more interesting strategies just because you have more people playing. Like,
yeah,
in a kind of like similar-ish way, but then you get like interesting divergence amongst that.
Yeah, in an interesting way. Yeah, in an interesting way, I guess it kind of, if everyone's sort of using the same sort of tools and the same sort of data sets, it brings that sort of gut instinct, or the fiddling with the numbers a little bit, back into it. If you think you can find that edge, find that angle, if you can predict one element that someone else hasn't, that completely changes that algorithm in your favor, and you've got that one decision correct, then that can be in itself your edge. And that, again, probably brings us full circle back to the original FPL, which is just picking players a little bit more on that gut instinct. If you're using that instinct in a much more like definitive and finite, specific way, fine, but it's only making one prediction rather than 11 predictions each week. And if that then changes the algorithm and makes it different to everyone else's, then I suppose that's where you can gain your edge now in a pretty hectic, pretty busy top 100, 200k full of EV and data-led managers.
I would say definitely that still the biggest edge is the minutes. Like, to be clear, like that hasn't gone away. I know we haven't really chatted about it because we've talked about it before, but if we're going to emphasize like where the edge is, like it's very difficult to be a better predictor on average than review. If you are, like, you could make decent money like betting. If you actually are better on average, you can be better if you're like an expert on like very specific things, like be more accurate on those things for sure. But like that's only going to carry you so far in FPL anyways, and like getting the minutes right is like way where the edge is if you're playing analytically. Like to be just like ultimately, like that's what we spend most of our time thinking about and talking about.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that what's really interesting as well, to bring it to kind of the fore of FPL in terms of play style and strategy. I noted that Johnny Curie, who I think is FPL Spaceman on Twitter, wasn't he? I don't know if that's the same person. He constantly drops analytic at 64 versus the Elite 64 FPL General sort of league of elite FPL managers every week, and it's really fascinating. Do give Johnny a follow as well on across those kind of platforms. But it's really fascinating to see the different play styles, and really spoke about kind of the evolution in the summer. But it's really interesting how quite some weeks, obviously the analytics crew and it's pejorative to say the vanilla crew, but like the kind of the historically elite managers. Some weeks you'll see kind of everybody kind of agreeing, right? This is a week to roll. This is a week to bring in this particular player. This is a week to captain here. More so of Salah this year. But some weeks you'll see analytics managers all in one captain. So Palmer for Southampton is a good example, whereas some went for Salah a couple of weeks ago, and where you see kind of differentiating. So you see there's differentiating options in elite, whereas in others you'll see something completely different. So, for example, this week analytics managers were far more in the blank hit friendly than their elite manager counterparts. I'm sure there's some crossover, of course. I'm sure some of the elite 64 are in analytics 64. I'm sure, like Ben Crellin, for example, I'm sure is in both. But I mean, do you think like elite managers in general as well are kind of catching up to the trend? I know there's probably a few in the analytics ranks anyway, Simon, but it's fascinating. And we've spoken about this a few times already, that kind of, and Sam just said in the top 200K, there's so many people all doing the same thing or similar things using the same tools. Is that kind of the case, do you think, at the very top end as well?
Yeah, I think there's decent crossover in those two leagues now. I don't know exactly what it is in terms of the numbers, but I definitely know there's a few in common. I think there was a few different strategies though. Like I think early on you saw like the two, Haaland and Salah, versus for like just going for one or the other. Was like a pretty big difference. I think you see some. Oh, there's 9. Okay, nice. I thought it was more. Never mind.
Johnny in the live chat saving us there. That's good.
I love it. We have live fact checkers on the podcast.
Saves me a job.
The only ones left. We think we need to get rid of them and replace them with I don't know who's
AI bots.
Just replace them with the AI. They'll definitely look after the world. Anyway, continue.
We have interplanetary fact checkers. Where was I? Yeah, I think there's pretty good differentiation this season, though. I think it's a function of both the rules and the pricing. And I think there was decent differentiation in the early teams analytically, because it was like 2/3 were on a Haaland draft and like 1/3 were on Salah. And that meant you had quite different players, and like you had then quite different implications for wildcards and when which game weeks your team was good and bad, and then what you decided to do about it. So like early on, I think like analytic leagues pretty like fun and interesting. I didn't really follow what everyone else was doing, just to be honest, because I don't know. It just is enough to manage my own team. So I don't really know what everyone else has been doing. I know like Chris Wood has been rinsing me and like Nottingham Forest in general.
We'll come on to him.
which I know. Yeah, I know it's on the running order.
Yeah,
it pains me more as a Leeds fan, like because obviously I've watched him for like 3 years or whatever. But never mind.
No, no. Sam, what's your view of the great phrase, a great word I've started using recently? And some people might just be like, "All right, I'm turning this off now." But anecdata. What's your view of the kind of the anecdata of how people have started changing their approaches? I guess throughout the zeitgeist and throughout, I guess, again, maybe touch on content creators again, what you listen to, because it's definitely a mix as far as I know. I mean, my content consumption is limited nowadays, just due to time, really. But the anecdata seems to suggest to me, at least from what I see and hear, that some are really open to this, and others seem to be kind of, how do I put this nicely, mysteriously arriving at review optimal solutions despite a lot of optimal toing and throwing. And a lot of content creators are, of course, within that sort of elite grouping. I mean, do you think that there's definitely an overlap that's going to continue? And John said there's 9 managers in both leagues, but I'm sure amongst the upper echelons, if you look at kind of FPL Research's top 100 or something like that, I'm sure there's a lot of managers there who are kind of using review as a reference point or something like that.
Well, yeah, I think Simon touched on it earlier. Fundamentally, these data points work. Like the review works, analytics works in terms of getting pretty consistent, good ranks. And so it's a little bit of a survivor's bias or a self-fulfilling prophecy where over time, the ones who have the more highly consistent ranks are going to be more often relating to review or relating to analytics in some way. And so the Elite 64 over a long run average is probably going to start becoming more analytically driven because again, it works. And we've seen that trending upwards in recent years. So it might be 9 this year, maybe 11 or 12 next year, maybe 15 the year after that. I think the trend will continue. And I think the more that it's talked about on podcasts like this one or much more popular ones out there, which I'm sure there are many, there are going to be conversations had over the next few weeks with a load of review and analytic driven managers who are open about it and saying, yep, that I'm getting great ranks. I have done for the last few seasons because I play in this way. And people who might not have a great rank this season are like, interesting. I wonder if I should maybe check this out over the break and come back and maybe change my play style a little bit. And I think season to season, we'll see a little uptick and then again, it will rinse and repeat. And over the next few seasons, I think most people, because we're so rank obsessed as well, that's another point I want to touch on, that FPL is a game and we're here to have fun, but there's so much like a sort of a weird pressure now on anyone who puts themselves out there publicly in any way to have a really good rank history or a really good season rank. And if you haven't, then a lot of people just won't listen to you or take you seriously, even if the content that you're creating or the chats that you're having online or whoever you're talking to are perfectly nice, pleasant, happy conversations and reasonable in the logic. If you don't have the rank that year to back it up, then a lot of people kind of disregard that. So people might start feeling like their hands are tied a little bit and that they need to bake it in more often than not to prove their worth as an FPL manager, which I think, if I just round off quickly without going on a tangent too much, I think that's just a bit silly. And we're here to have a bit of fun and chat about football at the end of the day. I don't think you need to have a good rank history to be able to enter into that conversation or talk about it in any different format. So yeah, I'll leave it there, but I do think it will get more and more popular to lean on analytics and use it, and it will pop up more often in the Elite 64 in the next few years.
I remember many years ago, Si, when you first came on the pod again, it was one of those things that we touched on, wasn't it? That, you know, the grass FC sort of side of it is so subjective and you ultimately miss things. So, and that's what kind of analytics does for you. It just opens the door to being able to have a more objective sort of overview of what's going on, taking your own biases. And you said kind of quite memorably in preseason that it's quite a humbling thing to use review and admitting that you're not kind of the expert in this situation. And I agree with you, Sam, that in lots of ways you want to be, and that's kind of evidenced by the rank, which you wear as sort of something to signal your virtue almost, that, you know, your rank is kind of showing that you're kind of superior to the market in some ways. I mean, that's what FPL initially was. You know, I'm betting I beat the market with what I did because I did so well. But I think that kind of people do by extension then kind of, if there's a great tool to use, and Simon said it earlier, there's a great tool to use that kind of clearly works for people, then there's no kind of drawback really to just incorporating it in your own kind of thought process. I think that's absolutely fine. And I think that kind of that's what we're all kind of saying we're expecting to see more and more. Just to bring it to strategy and just to bring it to this year and what we kind of spoke about in pre-season and then ultimately what got sort of unveiled as time rolled on. The first thing used by rolled on is a nice segue there. The key impacts of kind of rolling the 5 transfers analytics this year, because that, I suppose, completely blew things up in loads of ways. It completely meant that a lot of the way in which the analytics managers were playing, I don't know if it completely changed. I think it kind of augmented the way analytics managers played. Because I know, Simon, I saw a post from you either on Blue Sky or in the Bad Place, and that you got to 2 free transfers really early on the season, and you sort of regarded that as the minimum kind of for the rest of the year, because it kind of functioned as sort of an insurance policy, a bit of a safety net, and you had that flexibility therefore to keep going. I mean, to what extent is kind of that flexibility that this now gives you important to you as an analytics FPL manager, I suppose?
Yeah, I'm a little bit obsessed with free transfer value. So you've opened up another kind of worms, which is great. So I think the 5 free transfers kind of like opened up different ways that people think about free transfers. So if you look in review, essentially it has kind of like 2 dimensions that it operates on: the number of game weeks you have left and the number of free transfers that you have currently available. And then that like calculates your free transfer value. So basically, the more game weeks left, the more valuable, because you have more game weeks you can use it in. And then the more you have, then the less valuable, because you're closer to running out and being in the use it or lose it situation. I don't love that like way of thinking about it. Then the Python like default solver. Sorry, we're getting a little technical, but it values like basically the free transfer basically based on how many you have left. So if you have like the 5th one left is worth less than spending your last one. So even within the same game week, like the free transfers get valued a little bit more, which is nice, because obviously you should be more cautious about spending your later transfers, because again they have a longer expiry date essentially. And then I set up my solver slightly differently. I set it up so that instead of valuing the free transfers, it values the how many you carry forward. So exactly because of that flexibility point, I wanted to try and capture that directly. And it's basically meant that I haven't ended up spending my last free transfer at any point this season yet. So I rolled in game week 2, and since then I've always had 2 free transfers at the start of every game week, at least.
And do you have a like sort of any point in the season earmarked to use that final free transfer, or is that going to be I intend to hold on to it all the way through until game week 38, and at which point you obviously just take the upside on that final free transfer?
Yeah, I guess it's also been colored by like kind of moment of like head rushiness into free hit in game week 9. So that's kind of like that shaped my whole season, because I've known essentially that I will need free transfers massively for the doubles. So I knew there's going to be like a blank in 29. We thought those doubles were going to go into 33, and then I thought I was going to like hopefully get away with like 33, 34 being okay. As it looked like stuff was going into 33, it was looking like a nightmare in general. But I was always looking to save free transfers because I just always knew I'd kind of like need them. Especially after we knew Everton Liverpool was going in. And so it's just like never really wanted to get down to 1, just because when you're on 2, it's pretty easy. Like to get back to 4 free transfers, you're in a really nice like flexible position in general. And if you can roll twice from 2 like to get there, that's not too bad. If you've got to roll like 3 times like without touching your FPL or like anything going wrong, like I don't know, it's just pushing it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm an impatient sod, as you know well, Sam, and I think the best I've ever gotten to is 3. And I think that, you know, when we go, when we do our season review, and indeed when we do our season preview next year, I think I'll just be like, just be more patient with your transfers. So I think that's something that definitely has been kind of the layers of strategy through having the 5 have just been supercharged, really. And I've got to try to, I mean, recent history has literally just shown me that if I had rolled 1 week and just not gone for the low hanging fruit, then I'd be in a better position kind of right now than I would have been before. And that's one of those things that you have kind of the opportunity cost, I suppose, don't you? I mean, the 5 free transfers, Sam, has definitely kind of changed the way that maybe we play, but maybe there's been a bit of a lag for managers like us who aren't particularly analytics uber alles, more of a dabblers. And do you think there's something to be learned from what Simon was saying there?
Yeah, it opens up that opportunity for patience a little bit more. I think when the maximum was 2 free transfers, it kind of it made it very difficult not to mess with your team every other week, even if it was in theory pretty much close to perfect. And making that one move, obviously, action isn't always the best the best thing for anyone's team. Sometimes it is to just leave it for a much longer period of time. And if you've got that upper limit of just 2, then every other week you're probably looking at making at least one move just so you're not burning that transfer. With 5, it does open up that back door to just be like, okay, well, my team looks all right. Maybe there's a move or 2 that I could consider that might gain me a little bit of value, but it's probably not enough to use a transfer when I can save it for a rainy day where it might be more effective and I might be able to gain more of that EV in a future game week. So yeah, I think I've rolled to 5 once and had 5 free transfers 2 weeks in a row because I used 1 and then had it again at one point. And I don't think it's obviously there is variance and there is coincidence in this, but I don't think it's pure coincidence that coincided with probably my best little run of the season where I wasn't maybe overly messing with my team too much and I was just letting it bake for a little bit. And after a while, I was in a much better place. And knowing that I could then attack like a double game week, for instance, I think that coincidentally went quite well with the assistant manager, and it meant that I could attack a different assistant manager each week because I'd saved those transfers, and obviously that gave me like 56 points, I think. So that was something I wish I was doing more often this season, and hopefully it comes back next year because I've quite enjoyed that possibility, and I think that I'll use it more to my advantage next year, hopefully as well.
Yeah, I think this one was definitely. Do you mean five free transfers?
Yes, I do.
Manager?
Yeah, not assistant manager.
I'm sure that will stay.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's obviously a very very nice rollover to assistant manager. I mean, powerful. Yes, we know that, and obviously shout out to Rob T again for helping us to gain 50 something points out of it. I mean, analytics wise, do you hope it's retained? Have you enjoyed it, Si?
Yeah, I think on the free transfers, before I get to system manager, I think ultimately what you do is you end up saving yourself hits. If you kind of like mentally bank, you're going to need like a certain number of free transfers to deal with like just problems. You're going to need like a certain number for like massive fixture swings, and then you're going to need like a certain number for double game weeks. Then like you don't actually have that many left to like for luxuries. And if you kind of think about it like that, then I think you end up improving your play quite a lot. On the assistant
Could you
manager,
give me the golden numbers on those, please?
Sure. Yeah. Why not? Wait,
How many do I need?
We can probably work it out. Like you can probably work it out if you like have your transfer histories and stuff. You can probably go through it and like how many was the injuries and stuff like that. And like I don't know if you wanted to like really nerd out on your game, then like I don't know. You've got the summers coming up, isn't it? Assistant manager, yeah, I don't know. It's a weird one. When I first came out, I didn't love it because I was like, it's not really FPL. Like FPL's about players. But then I don't know. It's kind of like I'm a bit biased in a way because I have a team ratings model, right? So like predicting who's going to win is like something which I just do for fun, without it being in the game. And so I don't know. It was a nice time to actually back my model. I had Glasner like slightly higher than Arteta on EV. I probably would have gone there anyway, just for the upside. I went for Glasner, which was nice on the system manager after double slot. It was fine. I think it was a fun chip to play over 3 weeks. I think it's nice that you can't play other chips with it. I think it's fun that it costs free transfers. I think that's a nice feature. I think the table bonus is cool. I think it's like it forces like a real like strategy choice between like taking a more sure, more certain, smaller like reward versus a like lower probability, higher reward, and kind of know that trade-off in advance. So you can't really complain when it happens. Obviously you can get unlucky with the Arteta where you try and get the short thing and it doesn't hit, but like it's never actually sure, is it? It's only like 70, isn't it? It's only like 70% or something. Yeah, it's going if you do it over 3 game weeks, hopefully you don't get like too fucked like 3 times in a row on a sure thing. So I don't know. Seems okay.
Yeah, do you hope it comes back, or are you hoping for another analytics-friendly chip? I don't know. XGI is the EV is what actually counts as points this week.
Yeah, well, I mean, like EV is like it's a good thing to try to just like target. If you think of the game as essentially just like a series of like weighted dice rolls, and you're just trying to like accumulate as much probability as possible, and then you'll get like maybe a decent score, like usually a decent score, like sometimes better than others, and like sometimes you'll accumulate these probabilities better than others as well. So like, yeah, just grab the EV, it's fine. Like
same as
what's the
Pokemon
drama?
trainers for many. Same as Pokemon trainers for many years. Grab the EV.
I do hope they retain it though.
Go.
Sorry,
Yeah?
man. I do hope they retain it to actually answer your
Really?
question.
Okay.
Yeah, either that or just like they give us a new mystery chip and they don't announce it till halfway through for like every year. That would also be hilarious.
Maybe that was the intentional thing all along, that they're gonna have a mystery chip every year.
I actually would love that, to be honest. But yeah, I hope they retain it. I hope they make it only playable from game week like 20, and I hope they make it 1 wild card for the season instead.
Ooh.
Yeah. Oof. I think that we spoke about at the end of our assistant manager stint, we spoke about it, and I think that kind of the key point that we both sort of agreed on was that it has to be from around kind of game week 20ish onwards. Like, you can't be doing that in game week 2, game week 3, when 3 points basically mean you go from 16th to 3rd. I mean, there's no way there's no way you can justify that.
I guess you're going to have like table bonus versus doubles like trade-off. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, maybe that could be interesting. I think that they should, if it does come back, I think that maybe you'd have kind of incremental table bonus rather than just an arbitrary 5 places. I said that just feels like it was cooked up in the gents when 2 people were having a wee, just being like, oh well, what do we do? 5 places? Yeah, all right, mate. Yeah,
extra point for each league position above.
Yeah. I think that's a lot better. I think that's a nice way of doing it. I think almost
that'd be quite fun.
Obviously, you'd end up with some sort of some crazy sort of like outcomes, but I don't know how it will work on the downside. Maybe you just don't get downsides, probably because this is FPL after all. But keep the fun that way. Yeah, but I guess moving a wild card though. I mean, are you a bit of a purist about this inside? Are you someone who's just like, 1 wild card, no bonus, just 1 wild card, maybe captain, that's it.
Okay, so I'll explain the 1 wildcard thing, and I think hopefully I can convince you on this. So if you think about when teams are most similar during a season, it's either game week 1 or in a very popular wildcard week, and then a bit around like chip season, because you're kind of getting onto the same teams because they double and stuff. But that you can't really avoid. And so if you take away the first wildcard, it just removes 1 opportunity for all the teams to get similar again during the first half of the season. And so I just think you'd get more differentiation in the teams by the time you get to the second half of the season. I think it'd just be really fun. And I think like you could play it early, and then you wouldn't have it for the doubles, and then you could save it for later, but then you kind of have to like work out how to play all the way from game week 1 through to then without a wild card. And so you have just like interesting trade-off as well. So I think it would be fun.
It's also more importance on each transfer then as well. Like there's more value placed on like getting those decisions right week on week, because the cascading like ripple effects of getting something wrong very early on could be really quite damning if you've only got 1 wild card later on in the season to bail you out. So yeah, I like it in theory.
Yeah, in theory.
But no, as someone who's made the odd FPL mistake here or there, it's quite nice having that get out of jail free card.
How about this?
In terms of engagement as well, like unfortunately, FPL want people coming back in the second half of the season and staying engaged. So it's unlikely that they'll remove it, in my personal opinion. But if it was an analytics driven game, it would be quite fun.
I agree. But I mean, if you want to throw a nugget, just throw like 2 extra free transfers in like game week 10 and 20.
Okay.
So you get three in those.
Just keep the rolling as it is now.
Like a transfer window.
I think now the rolling you get now is absolutely fine. Just for
I love
context,
it. Yeah.
In fantasy Bundesliga, every international break you get unlimited transfers, but you do get 5 transfers every week, so it's a little bit different. But I mean, there are different ways of doing it. But with the rolling now, as opposed to how it was, I mean, back in the day, you only got 1 wild card, didn't you? And that was it for the rest. And that the wild card 2 was basically introduced for, as you say, Sam, getting people back later on in the year, and so they could kind of just come back and be like, oh, okay, well, I'm done with the season, but I can still compete in my monthly mini league and all this sort of thing. With the 5 transfers, I don't think that they ever kind of rescind it, but hey, there you go. And I suppose in terms of just the value of transfers, I suppose it would be remiss of us not to discuss certain players. We'll come on to Chris Wood in a minute. You can have your kind of 10 minutes on the soapbox, just saying how much you hate the guy, Sai. But I think we do have to discuss the monster that is Mo Salah. I'm not going to get you to wax lyrical about him now, just because it's all kind of quite a tautology, really, what you're going to say. But I mean, one thing that I have seen, which is really interesting, and Sam kind of mentioned it last week as well, but there's definitely some division in the community overall, and especially in analytics too, and the crowd that I keep in touch with, over keeping or selling for the end of the season. Because I suppose if they hadn't have knocked out of the Champions League, then I think that kind of was very clearly kind of in the sell camp. I think that there was kind of a lot of kind of feeling that, okay, this is the point where that value could be better kind of dispersed throughout my team. But now, what's your view on Salah this year? He's one of the sort of rare birds where form and value do sort of meet and create something beautiful. Obviously, been an FPL legend. Not going to talk about that again. But from now to the back 9, from an analytics perspective, is he just just leave him in? So I noticed my review, for example, last week was it was basically just saying, just sell him. Buy Bruno Fernandes, who again we'll come on to, and probably I should have in terms of points. But now, what's your view on him?
Clearly had a great season. One of those ones where like great data plus running hot like come together, and then you get like a massive FPL record. It's kind of funny. He's the 2 seasons where not everyone has owned it from the start. His first one and this one have been the 2 where he's just like absolutely run up the score, which is just quite funny. Kind of classic FPL.
Yeah.
He does take notice of that as well. Like they always do an interview at the start of each season on like from FPL and all of that. And he was saying at the start, like, back against me at your peril, I'm coming for you. So he knows. He's having us all.
Always go for the Salah differential. He's fired up. That's a new. You can put that in the review model. Multiplies the EV by 3.
Angry Salah multiplier, yeah.
But is the EV in selling, Simon? That's the question we all want to know.
Yeah. I sold him on wildcard. I think 90. I just had a quick look, and like 90% of the analytics Elite 64 sold him, or don't own him, I should say. And I'm pretty sure everyone did before, to be honest. And yeah, I think you kind of have to just follow it, right? Like a player with more fixtures is better than a player with fewer fixtures generally, if they're like not too that far away. You can get onto Haaland, he's likely to double in 33 and played in 29. It's 2 extra games in 5 game weeks. I don't know, that's quite a lot. So then, I'll probably try and get a Salah back in 34 with free transfers. I don't have a free hit. I don't really know what the plan is if you have a free hit. Maybe you get him back in sooner if you free hit 33. And then I guess if you free hit 34, I guess you could just do it in 35 or something.
Yeah, I mean, Keaton's why. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it depends on the fixtures after 35 as well, because we don't know how they'll fall either.
Oh, that's just gonna be a crapshoot, isn't it? I think we'll come on to that. We'll come on to that when we get there. But God, that's gonna be just a crazy end of the season. I think we're just punts flying everywhere. But I think that's kind of quite interesting in terms of the Analytics 64 thing and the Elite 64 thing, just because I would bet you, apart from the 9 managers who are part of Analytics, that the majority of Elite 64 are just going to keep Salah no matter what. And I think that's kind of my mindset almost. So I don't think, because I can get Haaland anyway, etc. And that I don't know when I kind of see Salah's departure. I know you're more open to it, Sam, than I am. And I don't know. I feel like there's definitely an potentially an edge to be gained over the analytics crew almost in that way, just because and 90% of the analytics 64 have sold Salah, and by extension that means that a lot of managers who are following the robot are not the robot as in Haaland, but the robot as in review will have sold Salah. So therefore, he doesn't become a differential in general, Sam, but he becomes sort of like something that could be very handy in terms of effective ownership in the kind of the areas that we're competing in almost. So yeah, that's really interesting to hear, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm so far back that I imagine he will be very highly owned either way. I don't think too many analytic managers are like hovering around 400k right now, although I would love to be corrected on that. So I do still think that Salah's ownership is going to be worryingly high for anyone going against him. But like Simon says, whilst he's been in this incredible running hot season that we'll probably never see the likes of again, there is an argument to try go basically going up against him, because I think, as much as Tom mentioned there that yes, people will sell him, I still think the ownership is going to be largely extremely high still, just based on what he's done already. So I think anyone getting rid of him is taking him on, and it won't be the inverse of that. Whether or not I'm going to, I really need to map it out and figure it out when I get to the wild card. I'm not, for what it's worth, completely ruling out a wild card this game week, depending on how things fall over the international break and the FA Cup results. But I'd prefer to wildcard with more information in game week 31, at which point I will be frantically trying to find a combination I like, which doesn't sacrifice too much to keep Salah. But if I can't make that work, then I'm going to have to roll some dice at some point, and Salah might be one that I just try and take on for a few game weeks, but it won't feel good. That's for sure. It makes me feel a bit better knowing that Simon and all of the best managers out there are doing it though. So that's good.
Yeah.
I think if you want Salah, you just free hit 33.
Yeah. Which, by the way, I could be down for, depending on whether Palace go through or not. That's effectively the decision for me right now.
Yeah, if we get a measly, I said saying in the chat, and people were talking about it, that if we get a measly one kind of double in 33, maybe two of teams that aren't particularly fashionable, then maybe you do the 32 bench boost, 33 free hit, and then the 32, because the 32 bench boost, a lot of those teams you can see you place 34, sort that out. We definitely, that's kind of on the table. But exactly. I think the wider point is about kind of analytics is that you're almost, because of the Salah example, right, insulated a little bit from the general sort of rough and tumble of FPL. Like we said right at the start, that we've done a lot of sort of functional, as Sam was saying, this is our preview of the week ahead sort of thing going on, and within that you can kind of get lost in kind of the general trends going on surrounding ownership, particularly, and obviously through live FPL, we've all been kind of consumed by the fear of effective ownership, and it feels like that analytics in general, part of it is kind of, it's almost a badge of honor, isn't it, to be just unconcerned, unfussed, nonchalant about the fact that this player is highly owned, but I don't give a crap because I've got the power of review behind me. Like there's no this sort of FOMO doesn't seem to exist a lot of the time in analytics managers. I mean, what do you think is behind the mindset that kind of helps with that?
Yeah, I would say even the opposite. I think a lot of the time we talk about ways in which we can try to find risk. Like ultimately, the whole point of the game is to have different players to everyone else, right? Like you're trying to beat other people at the game, and therefore, like if you all pick the same players, you have less chance of like getting the really, really top ranks. Essentially, if you take on more risk, you're just going to widen your distribution. So you have like more chance of getting worse ranks, and you have more chance of getting better ranks as well. And then kind of like what's in the middle is like your 50% line, depending on how much EV you collect or whatever. And then, so like, yeah, generally people are trying to like increase their probability of getting the very top ranks. So we're trying to like seek risk and like find ways to like take that on. And so when an opportunity presents itself like this, where you're getting EV and risk together, it's like, yeah, you jump at it. And that's not true for everyone. Some people try to guard against risk, but I think that's becoming less common these days.
Yeah, because I think that we end up when you've got basically a lot of big voices using review, but also kind of appreciative of effective ownership, Sam, that you end up with a very big sort of a mass of people who don't particularly seek risk and are maybe a bit more cautious about taking on risk. And I think that's definitely, as I said, a bit of a badge of honor for the analytics crew, as far as I can see, that this sort of risk, it's kind of, hey, I don't own Salah, but there's not kind of the angst, the existential angst that you or I would feel about that, right?
Yeah, I think what Simon's just done there is he's tapped into exactly why I'm not a really good FPL manager and why I keep screwing this up for this season, which is I'll do something like a review. I'll have a look at like some what I would, and by the way, also like just logically thinking, okay, that would make probably a good transfer on paper, and then plug it into review. Oh, that looks really good, it's on my side, or reviews recommended something to me, and then I will stop myself from doing it thinking, yeah, but that's quite risky, the EO's high, it could really punish me, and it's basically just cutting off my opportunity at the source, and it's preventing me from stealing a march on any players who aren't willing to do that. So I'm kind of using these tools possibly in the wrong way, or using my gut instinct in the wrong way as well, and not willing to take on those risks, because I again, if you just look at my rank history as well, it's probably a case study in not taking too much risk, because I've been very consistently top 100k manager, but never really top tier ranks, never like top 1k or anything like that, never challenging the likes of a Prass or a Harry, just as examples. And again, I just don't think I take enough of those calculated gambles, and maybe that's something that we should all be a little bit more open to, and less afraid of what people are going to say about it, because again, that's something that I care deeply about, and maybe I should just push that to one side or to the back of my mind and say, you know what, I back myself.
That's because analytics nerds don't have any empathy, Sam, whereas you've got a lot of it. So I mean, it works both ways, doesn't it? They win at FPL, you win at life. There you go.
Oh, I don't know about that. Really don't know about that.
But I mean, that's I do think it's really interesting though, just that, because I think there's definitely this kind of idea that because you're using a robot to basically choose your moves, like there's an element of safety in it, and I think that's kind of something which analysts actually, because of it's been doing like strikingly well, and it's a proven thing to work, that you look at it and think, actually, it's not a risk averse thing, which is how a lot of people can initially think about it. It's actually something which does encourage you to take risks, and a lot of the time you look at, and we've spoken about this ourselves, Sam, that you look at what review is suggesting that you do, and you think, oh, this is rubbish, I'm not doing that. And actually, a lot of the time, it does kind of think, you kind of think, oh, you know what, actually, 5 weeks later, if I had removed X player who was at that point essential for this player, or just gotten rid of him and done something else with that money, then suddenly here I am, I'd be a lot better off. And I don't know, maybe that's just kind of a symptom of you coming at FPL from a different angle, because I think for us it's been more of a journey from kind of being a bit more sort of gut led, football loving, and then kind of moving into FPL, enjoying the stats, and then here we are with this new tool to use, whereas you've always kind of come at it from quite a statistical statistical point of view, I guess. So yeah, but Chris Woods is a way of cutting through all of this, isn't it? Because this year he's followed the likes of Miguel Amaron, he's followed the likes of Mr. Lingard, followed the likes of probably Danny Ings, is probably the best sort of analogy for Chris Woods. I mean, as a Leeds fan, it's obviously been tough, but how do you, speaking for all of the analytics folk out there, account for the Grass FC hero that is Chris Wood this year?
I mean, it happens every year. It's fine.
There's always one in there. There's always one.
I honestly don't actually have that much to say on Chris Wood. I mean, his numbers are like fine. They're not like mad different to what they have been for most of his career. They're a bit worse than they were last year, where they're a little bit up. And like he's finishing hot, and like good for him. Like and like good for the people that got the points. Like it's nice to get like good variance. Like it's fine. There's no drama. Like it's like there's nothing to say.
Just wait for us to switch the recording off at the end, and then he's just going to go into a massive rant on it. But
no,
I guess it's the exception that proves the rule, though, right, Simon?
Well, no, I mean, it's like someone's going to run hot, right? Like,
yeah,
it's like I said, it's probability, and like I had an old tweet where I posted an Excel sheet of like 20 sets of 38 dice rolls for no reason. And you can just kind of see like random narratives everywhere, right? And like some dice roll hot and like run hot, and like some run cold, and like just stuff happens. And like that's what randomness looks like. It looks more streaky than people think, and it's fine. And like it's fine. Exactly what Spaceman is saying.
Yeah. So I'll just narrate that because I love that point. Spaceman in the chat, JC. There are enough players that we should expect someone to run hot. And I think that's a perfect analogy for what Simon's analogy was perfect on that.
No, I suppose that kind of brings us to our penultimate player, which is Haaland for the end of the season. So we've mentioned a few times, and you said earlier on, Simon, that obviously him having 5 games versus Salah's 3. At the start of the year, he wasn't in the analytics mix a lot. But now, do you kind of anticipate that he's going to become a player that analytics kind of backs a little bit more? I mean, he's got the X-Mins, got the kind of the longitudinal data behind him. Is that something which is you'll kind of see having a bit more of an impact in analytics circles, and then by extension, what happens with the rest of us for the rest of the season?
Yeah, I think he was in the analytics mix at the start. I think probably 2/3 of teams had him, maybe a little bit less than on the average. I didn't go for him, but like most teams had him early on. I think they got off him like when most people did after wildcard 6. They picked probably Haaland mostly. I think most people who got him for 29 have kind of eyes on 33. Or at least just had the eyes on 29 EV if they're planning to wildcard like in 30-31, which is probably quite a lot of people, to be honest. And then, I think it will depend how the doubles fall massively. I think City are most likely to go in 33, right? Because it's either one of 2 FA Cup results. And I think their game has to move there because of European clashes or whatever, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, it's very likely that it would have to go 33.
So I think people who kind of like have them in their team now who aren't going to play a wild card kind of have eyes on just getting 2 extra fixtures. Otherwise, it was just Salah doesn't have a game, and then you can wild card him back in soon if you're free hitting in 33. Otherwise, you can kind of think about it if like the doubles damp squib or whatever. You can kind of like go from there when you know the fixtures. But maybe it depends on. He's going to need extra games. Like the thing is, though, he's got 21 goals this season. I know, like. Everyone kind of looks at it because he went like wild at the start of the season, and like City were obviously playing a lot better. But like he's still got 21 goals, and like the numbers are still kind of fine over the course of the season. He's still like getting reasonable amounts of shots and stuff. Like it's not like he's terrible. He's like not quite as threatening as he was in the previous couple of seasons, but still like, if he's got a double and stuff, like no worries.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. And I suppose kind of the final kind of thing to just touch on. Who do you think the golden child is of analytics FPL wise, and why is it Bruno Fernandes? Just to note that Saka was top of EV predictions for the start of the season.
Was he?
He was.
He definitely would have been like Haaland or Salah, I would have thought.
When it first came out, I think the first thing that I look at whenever it gets unveiled is who's the top of the points per million, or I don't know how it is kind of what the nomenclature is, and then it kind of was Saka by a long way. And I suppose that he and Bruno occupy similar profiles, and just having that sort of the XGI behind them. I mean, I don't know. Actually, I think maybe a better question. Who's been the biggest surprise for you this season in terms of the analytics? Like, which player has kind of really sort of just been, oh, I didn't really expect him to be kind of part of the zeitgeist, but now, here we are.
I guess kind of like Bournemouth attack has been a bit of a revelation. Like Kluivert's numbers are pretty nice. Obviously, his finishing has been pretty nice on penalties, very cheap. I think, I don't know, it is zooming out a little bit. It's kind of fun, right? It's like you always know some cheapies are going to emerge that are like outsized value, and you never know who they're going to be. They're just going to be either players who take a step forward, or like teams who are a bit better than we expected, or they get a few more minutes. And that's all good stuff. I think for that, like with Bruno Fernandes, I think you can kind of see why he's so valuable, right? Like the only minutes he's missed is from a red card, basically. He got like banned for one, and then he's got sent off twice. Otherwise, he's played every single minute. He was on 3 bonus before he even scored the goal, like last game week. I don't know. He's. I mean, it's annoying. I sold him 4 game weeks ago, and then since then he's got 7 returns from like 1.5 expected goal involvements, which is disgusting. While Palmer's got 0 from like 3.3 XG in 3 games.
Those short sample sizes will kill you.
No, it's just like, come on, man. Like, but like he just racks up the bonus. He's on penalties, and he always like racks up a little bit of XG and then like a bit of XA, because he just like spams the ball forward, kind of no matter what system he plays in. And he's basically always put up roughly the same numbers under every single manager and every single system. And you're just like, yeah, fine. He's very easy to leave in there for a long time. Just kind of double stuff made me move him out.
Yeah, having that look at longevity of the pick. Johnny in the chat said Simon remembers when analytics were against Bruno, and that was the first season, wasn't it?
I started a podcast for Bruno Fernandes therapy for like 150 like year ownership bets against. So this week was bringing back some old trauma, but it was only like 60% EA. So
yeah, I was shocked to see you didn't have him. I was just like, what the hell? You got to turn that badge in straight away. But yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And I think that I do think it was the likes of Bruno, and I think Saka as well. You see them as kind of mainstays, and see these players just kind of crop up in analytics teams a lot as individuals. Okay, well, I think we've kind of hit time, because we don't want to kind of labour the points any longer. But I think that's really, really interesting, and a really kind of cool deep dive into kind of just all the different sort of facets which underpin FPL and the interplay of analytics. Thanks for coming on, Simon. That was really, really good.
Yeah, so fun. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you everyone so much for listening. It's been a great pleasure. We were Who Got the Assist. You can find us on Blue Sky at WGTA, myself at FPL Pricey. We'll go through Simon's tags in just a moment's time, don't worry. WGTA_FPL on Twitter, FPL Pricey for me on there. Instagram threads, WGTA.FPL, FPL Pricey as well there. If you did enjoy the pod, if you could please do one or preferably all of the following, including following us on those social channels, giving the pod that 5-star rating. And of course, if you're watching along on YouTube, if you could leave a like and subscribe to us on that channel, that would be great. All of those things really do help us out. Thanks again so much, Si, for coming on. Really enjoyed it. And I'm sure we'll get you on again in the future very, very shortly to talk yet more about some random FPL review analytics buzzwords that we don't understand perfectly the meaning of. Before then, though, where can we find you, and how can all of the lovely people listening get hold of you?
I'd definitely love to come on again. It's super fun. Always love chatting. I'm sure there's a lot more we can get into for sure. If you want to find me, Blue Sky is probably the place. analyticf.pl is my FPL account, which is probably the most interesting for everyone. And if you want to see my team ratings model, you can see the website, which is analytic.football, which is also the handle for my other Blue Sky account, which is football and some other nonsense.
Perfect. Well, thanks again, Si, and thanks again always to Sam. So we're going on a bit of a break now, as we figure there's not much point in coming back to you on our usual slot next Tuesday with international break and FA Cup fixtures still to play. That means a 12-day gap for us. We'll be back with you on Sunday, the 30th of March, the preview game week 30. So it feels like a long time, but quite good to have a break, I think. I don't know. Who knows, Sam? Talk through an emergency wildcard, or maybe even 2 if events transpire to mean that buttons are pushed. Have a lovely couple of weekends off FPL. Speak to you very soon.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
O'Reilly.
Check engine light on? Take the guesswork out of your check engine light with O'Reilly Veriscan. It's free and provides a report with solutions based on over 650 million vehicle scans verified by ASE certified master technicians. And if you need help, we can recommend a shop for you. Ask for O'Reilly Veriscan today.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.